Hello! Today we are making the excavator block from the Mighty Construction Site series. This one is one of my favorite blocks in this series. It's got a little more detail than some of the other blocks, but don't let that intimidate you. It's a foundation paper piecing pattern, and I'll walk you through every single piece step by step so you always know exactly what you're sewing and why. If you want to follow along with the pattern, the link to download it from our Etsy shop will be in the description below. Alright, let's get started. The first step is printing your pattern. Print it at 100% scale. We recommend you use newsprint paper because it's lightweight and easy to tear off at the end, and I'll link it below. Once printed, cut out along the dotted lines. For any pieces larger than standard printer paper, you'll need to tape them together. Leave an overlap on one side, align the printer lines carefully, and then tape. This ensures the correct size of your pattern. After I'm done cutting it out, I like to color mine, or you can print it in color so you don't have to do that. But after you get it all colored, it's nice because then you can just go into sewing and you know which colors coordinate with your fabrics. Next up, this is a personal preference thing. I went ahead and cut out the first piece for each section and then pinned it on there so that I just had that ready to go. You do not have to do that. Again, it's personal preference, but I just like to have that, so I've got my first piece done. When it comes to the first pieces, you want to make sure the pretty side is facing away from your paper, and then you're going to move on to your second piece of fabric, line that up across the line, and make sure that the pretty sides are facing each other. So this time your second fabric, the ugly side is facing out, which is opposite of the first one. Alright, so we've got that sewn in there. You've got number 1 and number 2 right here. And then you are going to fold your pattern down out of the way so you make sure you're not cutting your pattern. And then we are going to cut off that excess fabric. You can use scissors, you can use a rotary cutter. I'm going to show you different ways throughout this tutorial. You pick what's best for you. After I do that, I fold my second fabric out so that I know that it has covered my piece. I'm going to set my seam and then press my seam outward. And there we have numbers 1 and 2 finished. And now we're going to fold our pattern back and trim down the excess. Give myself at least 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Sometimes 1/8 of an inch, it's personal preference there. But I'm just folding the pattern out of the way at the lines and then giving myself 1/4 of an inch seam allowance to clean it up and reduce bulk. Alright, we've got 1, 2, and then we move to 3. So I am going to grab my piece of fabric that I'm going to use for number 3, and again we're going to do pretty sides together. Line that up with that seam allowance line that we just created, because then I know that it's going to be good. Sew that on there, and here we have it. So there's my seam line right there. Make sure that it is on the line. That's really important with foundation paper piecing. I'm going to fold my pattern down out of the way so I don't trim it. And then I am just going to use a ruler here, give myself 1/4 of an inch, and use a rotary cutter. That's my personal favorite. But if you don't have that, it doesn't mean you can't do foundation paper piecing. All right, I'm going to set my seams, press my fabric flat, and then I am going to clean up the edges again, trying to just keep things nice and neat as I'm going. All right, next step, we are going to do number 4, which again, we're going to put the fabric ugly sides together, line it up with that fabric that you just cut, and then sew across. All right, here we've got it. We're going to fold that out, make sure it's covered. It does, and so we're just going to clean that up. One quick tip about pressing your seams and setting your seams, make sure that you're not using the iron to force your seams open. Otherwise, you're going to see the threads and the stitches on the inside. And here we have it. Our first section is done. Not too bad, right? Let's move on to the next one. So this is section B. This is going to be the window of our excavator. I already have our first piece of fabric, pretty side facing out, And then I'm going to take number 2 and do pretty side facing that fabric. I'm going to line that up on the line and sew that together, following that black line as close as possible. So you'll see that it's right across that black line, and then I am going to remove my pin, fold my pattern out of the way. Well, check and make sure that it actually covers the section, which it does. I'm going to fold my pattern out of the way and then trim that seam allowance there and set my seam and press my fabric so it can be nice and clean. Awesome. Okay, so we've done 1, 2, and now we're going to move to 3. So I'm going to grab my fabric that I'm going to use for that section there and place it on my pattern pretty sides together. So we're going to match up that white and then line that up so we can sew it right across that black line. And again, we want to try to be as exact as possible sewing across those lines. I'm going to fold my pattern down, give myself my seam allowance there, and voila, look at that. We're doing the exact same thing over and over and over again. Once you get the basic idea, it's really just so easy to go through this. So we've got 1, 2, and 3. We're going to move to 4. Same process, but this time I'm folding back the pattern so that I can clean up the seam allowance on the sides. And then I'm going to repeat the process again. Put pretty sides together, line them up, and sew right along that line. Okay, now we've done 1, 2, 3, and 4. So now we're moving on to 5. I'm going to lay that down, do pretty sides together, making sure that I have a fabric piece big enough that when I fold it over, it's going to cover my pattern. And we've got it. So there's my seam line. I'm going to press the seams, press the fabric, make sure it's nice and clean there, and then trim along the edges. Alright, so the next steps, we have these 2 corners, 5 and 6. It's the exact same process. We're going to do pretty sides together along that edge. I was having a hard time lining it up, and so I actually cut part of my fabric so that it gave me a guide as to where to line that piece of fabric up for the corner. But you do the exact same thing on the other side. So you line it up, pretty sides together, sew across the edge. So I just did that on both sides, and you always have to pause this and do it yourself. And then for the very last piece, again, pretty sides together, and then you're going to fold it up and make sure it's there. And we've got that trimmed up, and we have now finished our second section. I'm going to move over to section D. I'm skipping C because D is a little bit simpler than C. I've got my first piece down, pretty sides facing out, and then I'm going to get my second piece, pretty sides facing each other, so ugly sides are going to be faced out, and I'm going to sew right along that black line there, giving me my first and second pieces within this section. Then I'm going to fold my paper pattern down and then just cut along the side to give myself a good seam allowance and a guide for placing my other fabric. Then we're going to set our seams, press, and then trim all the way around my pattern here. And then I wasn't going to bore you with watching that yet again. We're just going to move to piece number 3. So I'm going to lay my piece down, again, ugly sides together, and sew along that line. There we have it. If only it were that fast, right? All right, so this one, I'm actually using my add a quarter ruler. It's really cool because it has a little bit of a lip for that 1/4 of an inch that helps you to see, like, kind of grab the paper and hold that paper. I'll link this one below as well. It's not necessary, it's not a requirement, you don't have to, but it is kind of a luxury. All right, so we've got 1, 2, and 3. 3's all trimmed up for the most part, but then we're gonna go to 4, and then we'll hit 5. So 4, again, we're gonna fold this back, and then we are going to give that seam allowance. Again, that's just really helpful to reduce bulk, and then also gives you a line to line your next piece of fabric up. Alright, so then you line that up, ugly sides together, go ahead and sew that across that line, and then you're going to do the exact same thing. You're going to set your seams, press it, and then do number 5. I did not film doing the last section there. I don't know if I just forgot or I just got in the mode, but you're just going to do the exact same thing, and then you'll be done with section D, and then we are going to do section C next. Alright, we've got section C here. I actually didn't start this one yet, just so you can see. So I'm going to do pretty sides facing away from the paper, so facing the table, and I am going to put that fabric on there just so that I know that it is covering my entire area, and then pin that on there so that it stays in place while I find number 2, which is right there. So then I'm going to grab my fabric and find a piece that's big enough to cover this area. Alright, I've got my fabric piece here. I'm just checking where that needs to be laid out. If you don't want to trim your piece of fabric beforehand, I've found that creasing it can also help you kind of cheat a little bit, find your line to make sure you know where it needs to be sewed down. And then again, just making sure that you're following that black line perfectly and as accurately as possible to create those seamless lines when you put all of those sections together. You know what I'm just realizing? I did number 4. I definitely went out of order. Luckily though, that doesn't matter because there is nothing overlapping, but definitely go with number 2 first. I am setting the seam though, and I'm going to press it after I trim and make a seam allowance there. It happens, especially when you create the pattern, then it's like you already know what's going on. So sometimes I just get stuck in autopilot. So I apologize for that, but I just barely realized that, not even while I was sewing, I just realized it while I was watching my own tutorial. Well, we've got that seam allowance there. As I pull that fabric back, I'm able to show you that it covers that piece, so we're good on that part. And then I think we're gonna go with number 2. Alright, so I'm just folding my pattern back, creating that seam allowance and clean line for me to line my next piece of fabric up to. So we've got 1 and 4 technically, but we'll do 1, 2, and then we're gonna go to 3, technically 2, but this is our 3rd piece because I kind of messed it up. Alright, then I am lining up my fabric, pretty sides together, and double checking that I am going to be good on that line, which I am, and I'm gonna sew right across that black line, making sure that I am as accurate as possible. And there you have it. So we've got that seam right there. Then I just need to fold that pattern down so that I can trim that seam allowance and clean it up. While I'm at it, I'm also going to press and set my seams there and then clean up the rest of my block, just so that I can get rid of all the excess fabric and bulk that's kind of getting in my way as I move on to my next pieces. Alright, so we've got that all cleaned up, and we are going to do our last little triangle there to create the excavator scoop, and then we will do the bottom part of that piece. Alright, so we did our tiny triangle there and then the bottom part, and we're going to just repeat the same steps. We're going to fold our pattern back, trim it, give it 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, and then set and press our seams, and then move on to the next pieces above our scoop. And look at that, we've got a scoop. Now we are going to move to number 6. We've finished our scoop, and now we're going to shape the boom of the excavator's arm. This is going to be a background color. So you want to get your piece that's going to fit that section, and then line that up with your seam allowance that you've created after trimming your pieces that you've just done, and then sew along that black line. All right, we're getting close to finishing up this section here. I'm folding my pattern back and creating that seam allowance, trimming down the bulk a little bit, and then we will move to number 7. All right, I've cleaned up my section here, so it's got some clean lines, and then I am going to use the lines that I've created to get my piece lined up, my fabric, for section number 7, and again sewing along the black line as meticulously and accurately as possible. And there we go, we've got our boom for our excavator starting to take its shape. Fold that pattern back. Make sure you get that pattern out of the way so you don't want to chop it off, and then you've got your fabric pressed and folded back, and then we are going to our next, second to last piece on this section, where we start seeing that excavator's boom really starting to take shape. It's one of my favorite things about foundation paper piecing is watching these images like come to life as you are starting to sew them and getting further along in your sections. It's so satisfying, and part of the reason why I love this style of piecing. Alright, so I'm going to speed it up just a little bit. We've got that fabric on there, and then I'm going to trim that, reduce the bulk, and then we are going to move on to our last piece. Super exciting. We're moving right along here. Alright, got my last piece of fabric, and we're doing ugly sides together, and I'm just lining that up along that black line there, and then I'm going to set this on my sewing machine, and we will finish up this section in no time. Man, the amount of projects we could do if we actually were able to do this that quickly. But here we are, we've got our last section here, section C of our top piece of our block, and we're going to move to the bottom section and do the track. Alright, so this is section F. I'm starting with this one because it's kind of smaller of the 3 that we have left. I've got my middle piece, so my first one on there, pretty side facing out, and then the next 2 I'm going to do pretty sides facing each other. I've got that one triangle on there, and then I'm going to do the second triangle as well. Since we are pretty far into this block, I'm not going to show you every single step because it's, again, just repeated of the previous steps, but I still want it to be helpful, so I will still show most of it. Alright, so we've got 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to fold those back, set my seam, press it, and get those cleaned up. One thing that you do have to be very careful with if you're going to sew multiple pieces is that when you're trimming your seam allowance, you aren't accidentally cutting off the fabric that you actually need to keep. So it is a little bit riskier when you're doing that, so just be aware of that. Another thing that I wanted to show you about this add a quarter ruler is this one is actually tapered on the end, so it can come in handy when you're trying to fold your pattern back by holding the ruler across that line and then using that to crease the paper. So I did want to show you that that is a possibility, something that's nice to use. I know that my mom does that a lot. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I'm kind of just chaotic in life and in sewing, so it's on trend for me. Alright, next we're going to do the top 2 sections to kind of round out the middle of the track that we're creating for this excavator. Again, I did the same thing that I did with the 2 triangles. I also did the 2 other sides, the top and the bottom. I prefer to do that just because I get in the groove and I want to put those pieces on. But you do whatever works for you. You do not have to do it this way. And then the last piece here, I'm going to line up, sew across that black line, again trying to stay on that line as much as possible. And then we are done with block F. We just gotta trim it up, and then we can move on to the next one. Can you believe it? We only have 2 more sections to go. I didn't film the very beginning parts of this one because it's exact same as the other one. I did the first 3, and then these last 2 are exactly the same as that previous block. It just differentiates because we're starting to create the curve of that track. Alright, as you can see, I'm just cleaning this up, making my block a little bit cleaner as I move on to number 6. Again, 1 through 5 is exactly the same, so if you want to rewind, you can and follow that one. But I really think you can handle it to move on to this one without me filming it, because again, it's exactly the same. We're going to do pretty sides together for number 6, line that up, and sew across that black line. And then we are going to fold that out, make sure it covers the section we need it to cover. It does, so we will trim this, press our seam, and then move on to creating that curve of the track. Alright, so we're trimming this up, and then your next steps are going to be doing each of those triangles, very similar to numbers 2 and 3, and then you'll do that flat line, and then our section will be done. And we can move on to the last section of the block. Yes! Alright, we are in the home stretch. We've got these 2 pieces. We just need to get this last piece done, this last section done, and then we've got a complete block and we can start assembly. Again, you start with 1 and 2, then you hit 3, and you go around just like you did with this previous section. It's just the last piece is going to be longer. Just a reminder, you do pretty sides together, you line it up so that it covers your piece, sew along that black line, open it up, make sure you've got enough fabric coverage, which we do. So then you're going to fold your piece back, give yourself that seam allowance, and then continue on to the next sequence. Alright, now we've got our last piece left before we can start working on our assembly. Again, pretty sides together, sew along that black line as accurately as possible, and then give yourself your seam allowance, trim around the pattern, press it, and we are good to go. Let's do this. Let's build our block. The assembly portion can be so exciting, but also infuriating at the same time if you don't take your time. Before I sew sections together, I want to pause here for a second because this is one of those moments in foundation paper piecing that really matters. You can see here that these 2 sections are going to connect right along the seam, and when they do, they need to continue the image. So I'm looking at these 2 points because these are the spots where the lines from one section need to flow directly into the lines of the other section. If those points don't line up, the image is going to look broken or off center, or like the block isn't going to be finished, it's going to be patchy. Alright, I'm going to start with these 2 because A and B don't have a line of continuation. When you put them together, you've got a little bit more wiggle room. And I want to show you how I like to line my sections up. I use a pin and I will poke a hole in the corner of one pattern and then flip it over and continue that on the other side, just so that I know that they're matching up perfectly corner to corner. And then I will repeat that on the other side. And then after that, when I get it all lined up, I will clip it along the edge of that seam, and I will use an abundance of clips, superfluous amount of clips, just to make sure that I've got my pieces together and there's no slippage while I am sewing. I cannot stress enough the importance of opening up your two sections and checking, double, triple checking that they are lining up, that they look good before you sew along that line. If it does look good, then you are ready to go. Just make sure you are as accurate as possible when sewing along that black line. So there we go. We've got our seam here, and we're going to open it up, set our seam, press it open, and personal preference, I like to also open the seams and then tear out the paper along the seam allowance that I just sewed for bulk management. And here we go. We've got our first two sections together. Let's move on to the next one. All right, so these two are the tricky ones. They've got 2 points that we need to make sure that we are aware of and watching. It's the part where the scoop connects to the boom, and then making sure that that boom creates a continuous line and it looks like one arm rather than a fractured line. This is actually one of the things that makes foundation paper piecing so great. The paper is telling you exactly where everything should land. So I'm just gonna hold these up together before I pin them, make sure everything's tracking the way that it should, get them together and then clip them and then open it up and really try to make sure that they are landing exactly where I want them to. As I'm pinning this one here, I'm not loving how those are not matching up. It just means that I need to slide it down a little bit. So just a little finagling is all you need. Unclip, check, clip it back up again, and just make it so that you've got your two sections lined up exactly how you want it to. All right, so you see how the line continues right across? That's what we want. Then I will just make sure that I am clipping or pinning right at those connection points first to lock them in place before I sew. Take your time at this step. It's worth the extra 30 seconds every single time. And look at that. How cool is that? This is the part that's so exciting. All right, now we're going to connect these two together. We've got one point up there at the top that we're really going to pay attention to make sure it's continuous. But really after this, it's smooth sailing. Like, we are so close. So again, I'm going to line these up, and then I'm going to take pins at the corners just so that I can make sure that we've got corner to corner right on, but I'm focusing on this connection point as well. So corners, and then that connection point is really what I'm going to focus on. All right, so you can see I've clipped the two corners and then the connection point, and then I'm going to clip the rest of it. I'm going to open it up and double check, and that looks great. So I'm going to sew across there, open this up, and we have the first half of our block done. So next we're going to add the track together. We're going to put these two together, and the same method. I'm going to put pins in the corners and then put clips along the edges. The nice thing is we don't really have connection points, we don't have continuous lines, and so this one should be fairly easy. You just want to make sure that you are watching your line, sewing accurately across that line so that when you open it up, it is not higher or lower than each other. It's a continuous straight line that we're going to connect to the top of the excavator. Again, we're going to repeat the process here. Pins, clip, sew, open that up, and then we can attach the top to the bottom. I wasn't kidding when I said I used a lot of clips when I assembled these. All right, we've got those attached. We're opening it up, and like we are in the home stretch. This is the last piece. I am connecting the top and the bottom. I connected the two corners with my pins and then did the clips all the way across. Personal preference, I also opened up those seams. You can see that at the bottom. But we are going to sew along that line, and you guys, we did it. Our excavator block is all finished. This block again is from the Mighty Construction Site Quilt, but if you're following along using the excavator pattern from the Construction Series bundle, the steps are exactly the same as what you saw in this video. There's just going to be small differences in how the pieces sit depending on which version you're sewing. There may be another extra piece or another number, but the sewing process is identical either way. Once you've got this block under your belt, you're building some solid foundation paper piecing skills. The excavator has a few more pieces than some of the other blocks in this series, but every foundation paper piecing block builds on the same skills. So no matter where you start with, you'll always be able to follow right along. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of our blocks in this series. And if you like this sew along, all the patterns are available in our Etsy shop. The link is in the description below. And thank you so much for sewing with me. And again, happy sewing.